Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 23 in the 68 Fastback build known as Fangled. In the previous video I was demonstrating fitment problems putting in a Coyote engine into a classic Mustang body. Now I'll point out that in 65 and 66 these cars had a very narrow engine bay. Like a small block is all it would fit. Later on in 67 and 8 they widened it out, made it a little bit different, so it did allow more room. And then even later than that, they allowed for bigger engines to fit. In this case, we're putting a very large engine still in a small body. If you set one of these cars next to a late model Mustang, you'll see that the dimensions are totally different. So these are really considered quite small. And that's why you have to make sure pieces and parts will fit. Now, as I was demonstrating in the last video, I worked on the vintage air kit, and I talked about the brake master cylinder, which I have not completed that yet. I'm still working on ideas for that, but I want to move on and continue fitting the engine. So also in the last video I cut away what was left of the transmission crossmember because it doesn't help us at all. It's just in the way. So get rid of that, make some more room underneath the car. But I'm back visiting exhaust. That's one of the ideas, or one of the things I have to think about as I progress through this. So as I'm going to demonstrate, I'll show you in a minute, the underside of this car has that TCI suspension, and that big piece underneath the middle is called, as I call it, the spider. That's what it looks like to me. That's just what I named it. I don't know what they call it. But I've had to look at that and consider, how do we get the exhaust past that bar? It's up right in the middle of everything, and I've seen pictures from a Revology car where either TCI makes a different version for them or they modify their own from a TCI piece, some variation of that. If I can find that picture, I'll post it here. Now, the difference is the original TCI piece, it is a straight bar that runs across, and then the legs of the spider swoop down to go underneath the box pieces of the floor pan. The TCI does it a bit different, and it makes a little more room underneath there. So I have some pieces and parts up underneath the car right now, and I'm going to show you those and talk about maybe the idea of modifying that spider piece again. Now what I have done is I set a drive shaft up in here. This is just a regular Mustang drive shaft. I only wanted to put it in there to see where it came out up at the front. I'm going to take this back out when I set the engine and transmission back in. It'll be in the way, but I just kind of wanted to see how much this can be manipulated, like where can it sit and help create the proper angles. So that's just one thing I'm looking at. You'll see here I have this piece of exhaust from MagnaFlow. That is a 3.5-inch piece, and it is really tight inside of that cavity. What I've been talking about is this bar right here. So this bar is straight across as it's designed by TCI. And what it does is right here, and can't see it from that angle, for this torque arm, it attaches right here. There's two plates that go back, and then this torque arm mounts. So there's a bolt that goes through right here. Now what Revology does is they take this pipe and they cut it off, and they build their own pipe which angles slightly aft or back, comes across here at this location, and then comes back up. What that does is it moves this down about 1.5 inches. So basically this is a socket that represents the size of this shaft. What they do is they bring it down here in this area. And that way it takes this bar out of this path. So maybe if we do decide they're going to do some sort of exhaust here, that I think we're going to have to, then this bar being lower would allow for more clearance. So I'm looking at the idea of removing this bar, modifying it, rotating it down, and re-welding it onto these legs so that it's really down here somewhere. And when I do that, what I can do is leave these plate assemblies on here and just leave it attached and rotate it and find the happy spot where it belongs. Now there's adjustments available up here on top. This thing will actually is slotted, and so it could be manipulated in several different locations. So just another angle so you can see these are the plates that I was talking about, and this is the mount point. So the geometry tells me that that would work. It would allow this, again, to be down here and open up this area, and then these pipes would have to angle back up over to the side to these locations. So if I had a tubing bender, it would be pretty simple for me to do. As it is, I either will need to probably come up with another pipe that I can cut lengths off of, or be careful manipulating this so that if I do move this, then I can use all three of these pieces. It would end up being 3 pieces left, from this overall. So just an idea that I have, and that's about it for this right now. Also, this pipe, if I angle around here, it's hard to get in a good spot, but this is actually 2 pieces of pipe that are sectioned together, and then it comes back here to the muffler. It could not run straight. It will not run straight. It has to angle out so that the muffler would clear. And the reason for that is this muffler is supposed to be over here. So it can't be up against, there's a strut rod for the TCI kit. So if I take this off, get it off, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's the strut rod on the differential. So you can see that right there. So the muffler hits that rod. So it needs to be over this way. And there's a space basically made for that. It would fit like that. So this pipe would have to come back and curve into this pipe. So it's just some more things to think about as we work our way through this assembly or this build of this car. I'm really thankful that I have this lift. A buddy of mine provided this as a partial payment for working on his '69 Corvette about 20 years ago. And I am, again, very grateful that I have this thing. It's been so beneficial. So I lower the car down, roll it forward, have to get it up over the cable cover because it has a cable that goes across the floor on the bottom. Lift the engine up, and I have the adjuster on it now so that I can tilt the engine. And I showed that in the previous video. But as I lower it down, I'm able to turn this crank, and what that'll do is change the angle of the engine. You can see it picking up, basically the back half or the transmission is coming up. So it took a little bit. This is a snug fit, as I've talked about before. I continue to manipulate it until I can get the engine mounts to fit. I will also point out that I tapered the flanges on the cross member where the bolts go in, because that was really causing a problem. So I just smoothed up the edge, and that allows for the plastic or the polyurethane piece of the bushing that goes inside the engine mount to slip into that opening a little easier. Lift the car back up, and I typically put my jack stands underneath this to stay safe, and let's take a look at what's going on. Just because I'm thinking about it at the moment, things like right here, there's an adapter that needs to go on this so you can connect a radiator hose. They also make different versions of these that don't have this outlet right here, so you can connect your heater hoses without these quick disconnect systems. So there's billet ones that are available, so those have to get addressed. And then the other thing I'm doing is eliminating this unit, and what it'll do is it takes this out of the system, and then there's an adapter you put into the oil location here, the filter location, and allows you to move the filter all the way back to here. So this is a cooling system that is designed, or I say cooling heat exchanger, that is designed for the trucks. And so we're eliminating that. I've decided to address this oil filter situation. So here is the part that I have ordered, and then this is basically an adapter. This is a Ford part, and it is a double-sided kind of a union. So I'll open that up, give you a look at it. And you can see there, looks like the threads are the same on either side. And basically what you're doing is eliminating this heat exchanger type of thing that I talked about. So to do that, I'm going to take off the oil filter. Try to be careful here. And I don't know if this oil has been drained out of this engine or not. So I'm just going to assume that there's some oil in here. So I do have a pan underneath, and yeah, there's oil running out. So I'm going to let that oil drain. Might take it a minute or two to get that out of there. And I might just let that sit like that because I'd rather not have it run onto this sway bar. So I'll let that oil drain and then show you the next step. So the filter is removed, and it's kind of hard to see, but if you look on the inside of this fitting, it takes a very large Allen wrench or Allen head type of socket. So years ago I had bought this kit from Gear Wrench. I don't know why, but it just so happens that I had the right setup. So this is a 14, and I'm assuming it's millimeter 14, and that fits into that. So hopefully it's just as simple as removing that. I think that's all that's going to hold this together. That's my assumption anyway. I'm going to wiggle that there. Okay, so we got a little more oil coming out now, which is what I was expecting. But this holds all of this together. A little more oil coming out. And there you can see the threads on the other end. Hopefully you see that okay. And this should just come off. And it does. And what that leaves you is basically the regular mount for the oil filter. So my understanding is that's just a normal mount that you would find on like the Mustang version. So this has a mating surface on the back of it. Let me see if I can wipe this off here. So this piece has a like an O-ring on it and a mating surface. So I'm going to make sure that's clean. And then I don't see any difference in this, meaning I don't see any thread difference. So I'm going to just try this. Seems to fit that direction. Turn it around, and it fits that direction. So I think, I'm hoping, it's safe to assume we get another extension here. Now I don't know what the, there's probably a torque spec somewhere, but I'm just demonstrating this. I recommend you look up that torque if you need to know. All I want to do is kind of snug this down. And that's all I'm going to do. Now, that takes the place of that heat exchanger. And just because I happen to have this filter, I don't have any other filter available right now, which we're going to, put a new one on anyway. I just want to see how well this filter fits. And it fits. I like that. It tucks it in, gets it a little more under the alternator, and also clears the sway bar. So that's a nice thing. So let's take a look underneath the car, and I want to show you some details As I talked about before, we've got clearance here, which is good. Come underneath, and there's clearance here where the oil pan is and the cross member, so I like that a lot. Further back, I'm still assessing how I want to make all this work. But I want to talk about the headers. Now these headers, they came with the TCI kit. And on this side I have 3 bolts holding the header on. I could not get the header to go in on this side. It just won't go with the space that's available here. So I think when the time comes, the header will have to be installed and then lower the engine into place. But I want to talk about that header because this driver's side header is always cumbersome, and for multiple reasons. I actually talked to Sal at TCI. He said he designed these headers, but these were designed like 10 years ago. And so part of the problem that I'm running into right now is the shift linkage right here. So what happens is this shift linkage from the low car shifter, it brings the arm down instead of up. And Sal was saying basically to the effect that these were built without this transmission as a consideration. So it's hard for them to come up with, say, a universal header that's going to work with every configuration. Everything changes, you know, they redesign stuff every year, and so it's hard to redesign a header set every year. So this setup may have to be modified. Now, I'm looking at some different things. This arm, as I said, is now kind of interacting with the header. The header is not completely up in place. I have 3 bolts in it, and it'll move slightly, like I can raise it up, but the result is pretty much the same. You still have that arm right there. The other thing I have to look at is the output shaft for the rack and pinion. You can see this tube is right in line, almost right in line with that output shaft. So let me grab the Borgeson U-joint, because I mean that's what you would normally do, is it's a Borgeson rack and pinion. Let's look at their U-joint and see if that'll work. This is the Borgeson U-joint. This is what they sell, and it's intended to go onto that output shaft. Well, you can see that's not going to work. Like, even if you put this on first, you'd never get the header in place. And what Sal has suggested was a company called, I think, Sweet Manufacturing. They sell a more slim version of this, and he also said more than likely you have to put at least 2 of these in, if not 3. And the slimmer version would probably come very close to clearing this header tube. So I can show a picture of that as I go through this, but that's another thing we have to look at, is how to do that. Also, if you look back, I did a 56 Chevy I don't know, a year or 2 ago, and I think I added a carrier. You can buy a bracket that'll allow the DD shaft to ride in it so that it's not like flopping around, and you have to mount that to like the frame rail, and then it comes out of the steering column, the DD shaft as they call it, and then goes through that carrier. It's just like a hoop, and then helps connect everything together. So I'm still considering what I need to do with that, but I'll post a picture of that other company's product, and we'll see if that doesn't work. Now, this header, another thing I have to show you is the bracket for the cable. So first, let me take the header and kind of position it to where it's totally flat against the engine block. And then you can see that that arm for the shift linkage is still a problem. This bracket, which the cable goes through and connects to that arm, is intended to be mounted somewhere back here. And if I bring this forward, you can see it's kind of in that plane of the outlet. So we have to look at how this is maybe going to be working. I don't know yet. One idea that I've talked with Sal was taking the actual bracket, this bracket, and reshaping it, because right now there's a finger's width gap. I don't know how well it shows up on the camera, but there's about a finger's width gap between the transmission and that bracket. So if that was reshaped, we could bring it that way, inboard, just a little, which may or may not work. You know, I mean, it's just things you have to consider. How much clearance can I gain by doing that? And also, with this bracket, you've got movement fore and aft, and you could possibly modify this bracket and move this. Let's say you brought it more to that side. So, you know, you have to look at what options are available. You know, and it was a good conversation I had with Sal, because as we talked about this, he's watched my videos, and he said he really appreciates what I'm doing, because a lot of people don't realize what's involved. Whenever you start doing these sort of things and you're mixing parts together, or you're trying to connect things, it's just not something that they show you on TV. Like, they'll do it and they'll say, yep, it's done, but they don't show you all the conflict they had getting it to that point. So I'm trying to illustrate all of this so everybody gets an idea of what we have to do here. So I'm going to move on. Right now I don't feel like I'm going to be able to do much of anything, because I don't know where the exhaust is going to end up. I don't know if this linkage is going to work. There's a lot of variables, and I just don't want to start cutting and hacking and chopping stuff up. The header itself, it wouldn't be that big a deal to put a dent up in one of the tubes to help with the U-joint. That's not a big concern. I'm more at this point concerned about this linkage right now being right up against the header than anything else. I've thought about ideas like, how could I hate to say it, but modify this to where I could change the angle. Like, could I cut these tubes and flare this, you know, bring it outboard just a little to help with that transition. So I know that people have said ultimate headers is a good option, and maybe they are, but they're pricey. They're very expensive. So, okay. I'm going to move on to something else I want to talk about. Now, currently the transmission is kind of in a lower position, let's say. I do have this support up here, is angle iron on the output shaft, just kind of holding it in place. Nothing's set perfectly. And there's things to think about with this. So with this bracket, if we use the factory setup, and I've talked about this before, I have that cross member from Stifler's that would work with this. The other idea that was shown with the Revology piece was they actually came, once they put that pipe down here, they came forward and made a bracket to support this. I'm going to show you the Stifler's one and just see kind of what it does. And I'm not trying to beat this dead horse, but you know, this is a bracket that would go here, basically that direction, if we use this bracket system. But I'm considering the idea of coming forward off of the cross of the spider, as I call it, here. So if I were to use this bracket, this cross member, let's see if I can get back far enough so you can see it very well. So as I pointed out in the previous video, this is designed that the Stifler name goes to the back. And this is where you run into conflict trying to use this where you have the spider piece. This doesn't work with this part. And as I've said before, I've considered the idea of just turning this around and putting it in like this. And that really doesn't work either, because the way this is built, the angle, it's got a curve built into the pipe. And so you can't position this in such a way that you could use this setup. And what I've suggested before is actually cutting off this bracket and putting it on the opposite side. And if I did that, then I could come up underneath like this and likely use either this bracket, the factory mount, or use the one that came in the Stifler's kit. So that's still up for debate right now. The other thing I want to talk about while we're here is the angle of the transmission. And this will come into play later on whenever we look at do a second look at the master cylinder setup. When I was talking to Sal, he pointed out that you need about a 3-degree angle on the transmission, and that's based on how the car actually sits. So that was a number we talked about. And I know this is, if I'm just doing a demonstration here, but this is a digital angle finder. But if I put this on the bottom of the transmission, you can see, make sure I'm on there the way I want it. Right now it's at 5.5 degree angle. And so this, if it were to come up just a little to about 3, it's going to change how the engine sits as well. So I'm just going to kind of demonstrate that a little bit. So it'll raise this up maybe another ½ inch or so. I'm just speculating. But what that'll do is it helps with the master cylinder on the firewall. So again, all of these things, everything needs to interact properly for this to work. So I'm going to show you some other things that I'm working on. I'm going to set the car back down and we're going to take another look. So I demonstrated this before. This is that compact master cylinder, and this is designed to work with the brake pedal that's in the Mustang. So when I put this in, it fits, but there's a little gap between the front of this and the valve cover. However, by raising the engine up, or say by raising the transmission up, that angle is going to change and it's going to open up that space a little bit. So I'm feeling much better about this master cylinder setup. But let me show you what I ordered as a precaution. One of the other ideas I had was using this compact pedal that's designed to take 2 really short master cylinders. And of course this would mount, basically you'd put this master cylinder with the pedal through the firewall, and then you would mount these, there's 2 of these, onto this, and then you connect this pivot point back here. I say pivot point, this moves, and it also flexes this way. Now what that does is it would eliminate the proportioning valve, because you can adjust this left and right and it changes the pressure on each master cylinder. So when you push on the pedal, one of these would hit first and the other one would follow. So that's kind of how you do the proportioning on that. And this would probably work, but I'm not going to use it. Now that I see the other master cylinder will fit, to do this, to get this in there, you'd have to really do some modifications to get this into that opening. And the other concern, which I hadn't considered initially, was this pedal is straight. So you have the steering column to deal with. So if you're trying to get this in the proper location, the steering column is going to be fighting it. It's going to be on this side, I think, yeah, this side, pushing it, sideways. And so as I've thought this through, I'm like, you know what, that other master cylinder is going to work. So this, I'm just going to send it back, and unless somebody needs one of these. If you need one of these setups, let me know. I'll make you a deal. So that's where we're at with the master cylinder. Let me show you some other stuff. Now, as I talked about before, this gas pedal wouldn't work because it would bottom out before it ever hit the full stroke on the pedal. It would end up being against the floor. So this is out of the truck. So that's not going to work. However, I ordered another pedal through CJ Pony Parts, and this is for the Mustang. So you can see the difference in the way these pedals are shaped. The arm is different. And essentially, this one, with a bracket, I'll have to come up with a bracket, can end up right about here. And it allows for the full movement of the pedal. And the connection's the same. So this is going to be the new gas pedal for the engine. So that takes care, or will take care, once I come up with a bracket. I know that Mustangs to Fear sells a bracket, so I don't know if we're going to go that route or if I'm going to make my own. Probably be further ahead just to get one for Mustangs to Fear. They've already got it engineered, and I think it's like $100 and it's done. At least from what I understand. So that'll take care of the pedal. We've got this taken care of as far as the brake pedal. But now I need to show you something else that we're going to look at a little harder, is the steering column. So in this box we have an I Did It steering column. Now I've used one of these before on the Brooklyn Pony project, and these are always nice. I mean, they're well made. I haven't had it out of the box yet, as you can see, so I'm going to get a look at it. Very nice. So it has the output shaft, and we'll see what comes in the box. So you've got a clamp, 6869 Mustang floor mount. So it looks like this plate attaches to, I'm assuming, to the firewall. And there's a lever for the turn signal and the tilt. I haven't opened that up, obviously, but this bracket attaches, it looks like it attaches to the firewall, and then it has these ears that stick out. So when you slide it through, you clamp this together, and it holds it in place. Now what I want to do, I don't see a U-joint, so it looks like we end up getting another U-joint anyway, because we're going to need something to connect to this end, right? So the Borgeson, as I talked about previously, yeah, that's their connection. So we might use one of these. We might use two of the other brand. I don't know yet, but we're going to need to at least get one more of these. What I want to do is I'll put tape on this so that we can set it into the dash and make sure it's not scarred, and see how well this is going to work as far as getting around some of the stuff, outside. So let's take a look at that. All right, I took the steering column out of the box, as you saw, and I put tape on it, and then I opened up that little package with the bracket in it. Now it tells you to take the tangs and face them to the inside or up the column. And that's why you put tape on to protect it while you're doing this. And then the foam pad would go on after that. So it's going to slide up the column, act as a seal from inside against the firewall. Once I have that on, I'm going to show you just temporarily how I'm going to set it up in the car. I use a zip tie to hold it in place and then feed it in so it doesn't hang. Now the idea is just to kind of get it roughly where it belongs. Obviously I don't have the main dash in or any of that stuff, but this at least gives you pretty much the angle that it's going to sit at. And then we can look at it from the outside and see where it comes out on the frame rail and stuff like that. Here's the steering column coming out, and that'll adjust slightly with that bracket to get it exactly where we want it. And then this is what they call a DD shaft. And so that is intended to go into the end of the U-joint. So with the Borgeson U-joint they sell, that would end up on the end of the output shaft, assuming we have enough room for that to fit, right? Because the headers are not exactly where they're going to be. They're close, but I think that's going to give us enough room. And you can see somewhat, this is coming down towards, and I'll show you from up above, coming down towards the frame rail. And then the DD shaft is your connecting point. So what that does is you take the DD shaft and this slides into it, and that's how you connect the U-joints together. So as we talked about, it may need another U-joint, like you may have to put two together to get it to sort of curve, and then that little carrier piece would go in the middle here. So looking at it from up above, this lines up really nicely with the frame rail, and then take the U-joint, slips up on. That appears to be plenty of room there, and then of course the DD shaft, as I mentioned earlier. So we're going to figure all this out. Even if we have to, put a little dent in one of the tubes, I think we'll be okay. Still need to resolve the issue in the back though, where the header and the shifter interact. So I've got some other things I want to show you. So we're going to continue on. So I did take care of the oil filter. Got rid of that heat exchanger unit. But I want to show you some other concerns as we move forward, as I talked about with these hoses and how they run. So this hose is designed to go down to this side, let's say, of the radiator. This one with the adapter is intended to go over to that side of the radiator. Right now there's a lot of room right here. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to put the core support in and then show you a radiator that I have and some ideas we may have to look at. So we already know the core support fits really nice. Now the radiator we have is made by a company called Frostbite. So there you can see the name of it. And the problem we have to figure out is this radiator is actually for a factory 68 Mustang. So in this you get this packaging, you get a radiator cap. There's some foam up on top. And this is a really thick radiator. I'm going to pull this out. So this is like a 4-core radiator. Now I'm going to set it in position, but the problem that I see is the fact that the outlets are for a regular 68 like small block car, because they had put them both on the same side. So I'm going to look at this and see, is there something we can do moving forward. So I'm going to try to get it set up in place. I don't want to take the plastic off just yet. So setting this in is not a problem. It'll bolt right into the factory mount holes. So I don't see that as a problem. We've actually got a lot of room in here, which is good. But the concern, like, we can come off of this water neck and go right to this top one. Not a big deal. I'm unsure if we'll be able to do something with this one and loop it all the way down and then come back in, because on the end of this radiator, you know, it's a straight shot. So you'd have to have a 90-degree turn coming right out of it, and then it would have to come across and loop back up and curve back to this one. Now, there's another version of this same radiator. I think it's on Power by the Hour, I think has it. And what it is, it's basically the same radiator, but they put the filler necks on opposite sides. So the one on the top is on the passenger side, where I have my hand, and the one on the bottom is over here in this corner on the driver's side. Also, something to think about, these necks on these are a certain dimension. Let me get a caliper to show you what I'm talking about. And that's a snug fit. It's basically 1.5 inches. Just a little under 1.5 inches. Let's see if I can measure this. So I'll measure this the same way, but I'll have plastic around it. I'm going to lock that down. And that one actually works out. But I've seen other ones where they're small. So these necks are the same dimension, which is good. But I saw another version where they sell these where it's a smaller neck and you have to add on to get the bigger neck to fit in. So while this will work, the biggest challenge is coming up with a way to make that hose come all the way around to the passenger side from the driver's side. A couple other things here. This is the fan shroud that fits that radiator. So I'm going to open up this box and just show you how that works. Also, what I can see right now, I talked about these transmission lines, where they end up, and it looks like they're very close to being able to fit the outlets in the bottom of the radiator. And then inside the box, we have this nice shroud, and I'd have to see, it looks like, I don't know if it looks like it's universal. Like, the only thing I can see different is the location of these holes. There's two close together and two a little further apart on the other end. So I'm just going to set it down in there just to give you some perspective. And then the shroud, or the fan I should say, pretty good size. It appears it can only attach it to the back side. So it'll just take some calculating to figure out where that's going to sit. But it looks like, you know, we've got probably a good 3.5 at this point, maybe 3 good inches between the fan and everything else. So I think that's okay, but again, the bigger concern is the radiator hose and getting from the upper driver's side to the lower passenger side. We may end up getting a whole nother radiator, and maybe I'll work something out with the owner. I may be able to use this in one of my projects, and maybe we just get a whole new one that's built to match this setup closer. This would still work. The fan shroud should still work, no problem. So it's just something we'll look at and see what happens. Well, things are progressing. You know, it's always a struggle whenever you're trying to make different parts from different companies interact. I've been on the phone with Sal from TCI, and he's offered me a variety of suggestions and ideas. And, you know, he's a great guy. He's actually given me some ideas concerning the shift linkage and what we may be able to do as an alternative. And so I'm going to look into that a little harder. You know, we have the truck transmission versus the Mustang transmission. There's different configurations. And so using the low car shifter is probably going to work, but we have to figure out how to make the cable interact. So there's more on that later on. Of course, we got the gas pedal, and as I mentioned, Mustangs to Fear sells a bracket, so we might look at that bracket and see if it makes sense to get that, because for my time, it's probably cheaper to actually buy it from Mustangs to Fear than it is for me to make the thing, because I'm going to have to fabricate and cut and weld and make sure everything lines up. Now, it's not necessarily a priority at the moment because I'm still dealing with the tunnel and that sort of thing, and as I talked about, the angle of the transmission, trying to get that figured out. And all of this relates to the headers, the cross member, the exhaust. I mean, there's multiple things. And so we're working on it. You know, me and the owner have been communicating, and we're trying to resolve those issues as they come up. I will say he has sent me an email that I think he ordered the water neck, the billet water neck pieces, and the billet hose connector for the top hose on the front of the engine. And so the only concern I have right now is maybe if we decide to use a water hose that would come all the way around to the other side. I'm not a fan of that for a couple of reasons. One, I don't like that length of a hose. That leads to some serious problems there. And secondly, it is known that the radiator on these, or the original setup, if you have both the water necks on one side, that side of the radiator tends to carry the heat more than the other side. Like, I know it's meant to circulate around and get through that, but it's all on one side. By having it on opposite sides, it creates more of a flow pattern that allows the heat to be dissipated. So we might look at some ideas with the radiator as well. I know the other version of that one that we have will work along with the cooling fan. So we'll talk about that some more. The gas pedal, as I said, that's another thing. And then the connectors. And I think that's about it right now. You know, I'm trying to make all this stuff work, as I tell everybody, to test fit everything before you do any kind of final stuff. I really can't emphasize that enough, especially in something like this, whenever you're, again, mixing parts together and stuff just is fighting each other. So I'm not going to push hard in one direction or the other until I feel good about where everything is lining up and doing what it needs to do. So if you would, leave a comment and a thumbs up on this video. Also, I will put a listing for any of the products that I have endorsed or used in these videos. I do have some links for like the oil connector. I may be able to put some other stuff on there, and I encourage you to use those. You know, a lot of times I try to find the cheapest discount I can, and if I can pass it on to you, I will. But I also want to thank my patrons. Hands down, best group of people that I have helping me and following me along in these builds and encouraging me to keep going and do what I do. Even to the point where Sal, the guy from TCI, is watching my videos, and he is telling me that I'm doing it right because I'm showing people what can or what needs to happen in these processes. He said that to me. He's like, you need to, keep doing this stuff, because pointing out these problems is what helps other people. And so that's what my patrons are doing for me. They're helping me to continue to make these videos. So shout out to them in particular. But otherwise, that'll be it for this video. Hopefully there's more that I can get done on the next one, but that's it for now. So until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya. So I demonstrated this before. This is that compact Wilwood master cylinder. And this is meant for the Mustang. This is specifically has the blah, 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 blah. It did say, tape this up, be careful. And you would take this piece of foam and put it on the back side of this before you put this on. But since I'm just doing, I say that I put that backwards. Blah, blah, blah. And then this foam bracket or foam pad, this foam thing, okay, that's That's enough special effects. Into the end of the U-joint. So basically, we have to undo these